Okay, I think we're going to get started. We promised a prompt start, and so we will do that. So I just want to say welcome to everybody that come out tonight. We're thrilled that you're here. It's exciting times. I think everybody understands that. We're just glad to have you in the room. So just for housekeeping purposes, I think folks know that out the door and to my left, to your right, I guess, are the washrooms, and exits are the opposite way, the way you came in. I want to say a warm welcome to council that showed up. I think we have some council from the municipality, and actually Argyle is having a council meeting this evening, so they can't attend, but they send their best regards. So welcome, and I'll just go through the, oh, there it is. See, I knew I could press the button, it would work. This is basically what the evening will look like. So basically I will do a little bit of an introduction, not too much, because we want Brian Lyons and his team to be center stage for sure this evening to pass on the journey thus far in the concept vision that we have so far. Then I'll come back up and we'll do project next steps, so we'll know that where we are and what it'll look like going forward, or relative, facsimile of what we believe it will look like. And then we will open the floor to questions. So I think, Larry, thank you for providing the sound, and we'll have a microphone set up at that time. Actually, they're set up right there, thank you, so folks can come up. We're just going to ask that if you don't mind, to keep your questions until the end. I think most of you have a piece of paper on your seats. It's the Get Involved Yarmouth website. It's just a little piece of paper, so if you want to jot down your questions there so that you don't forget what they are and you can ask them later, that would be completely appropriate. So we want people to have time at the end to ask their questions. So basically, the priority for the town of Yarmouth, and the short story is that right after the election, which was, oh my goodness, I think it was exactly a year ago. It's October already. Council got together because it's important when you have a new mandate to sit down and figure out what is it that's important to you. What are your priorities, and how are you going to go about fulfilling those priorities? And we sat down with senior staff. I've been speaking 6 hours out of the area today, so I'm just a little bit hoarse, but that's okay. So we all sat down, council and senior staff, after the election, and of everything, you can imagine how many amazing projects there are that we could put on the table. And we did. We put everything on the table. We considered them. We looked at the good. We looked at the bad. We considered how could we get them done. And most importantly, for a council, is what has the most impact and what is important to a community and community growth. What ended up happening is the Arts and Culture Center became number one on our priority list. And I can't say if anyone was surprised or not. It ended up there by virtue of our conversations and the process that we went through. So for us, I don't know where to start except to say we're absolutely thrilled, not just with where we are, but the potential for this amazing project, for not just for this community, but the region and this entire end of the province. And I would probably stretch it and say, the whole province if we do this in the right manner. The excitement, because it's not just economic impact, which we know is inherently important in any conversation that we have, that we need to ensure that there's business growth, that the economic impact touches everybody and as many as possible with any project. But also for this project of this magnitude and in this direction, it's the social impact that hits us as well. And social in the fact that it should just meld a community together in so many ways, where you put dance and theater and music and visual arts and probably 50 other arts components that many of you could think of that I certainly couldn't. And we put that into the mix. And then we put the cultural pieces, and we put what we have in abundance here is rich, rich culture. We have the Acadia First Nations, we have Acadians, we have the Black community. Oh my goodness, you even got some Lebanese thrown in there, just for good measure. So the richness of the culture here is just absolutely amazing. And the culture, just the way we live, that we are a fishing community. And that matters to us. And how do you celebrate those things and put it all into one amazing facility? So we're really, truly excited about all the dynamics of all these pieces coming together. So what happens now is we have engaged, I think everybody's aware up to this point that we've engaged Brian Lyons and his team, so MacKay Lyons, Sweetapple. They're architects. They're pretty darn good, I have to say. I don't want to embarrass Brian, but he has enough letters after his name and enough awards that I think everybody in the room understands. He's world class. He's known throughout the entire world. And we are just so fortunate to have him as, I want to call him one of our homeboys, because he comes from Arcadia. And we're absolutely thrilled about that. That beautiful greenhouse that everybody used to drive by and say, wow. So Brian's a local boy. And his team, we have Will and Miranda, and they've done a tremendous amount of work, and they're excited as we are for the project to go forward and to see what the community thinks and all those pieces. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to hand it over to Brian and his team, and let's just give them a warm welcome. We're certainly thrilled that they're here.
Thanks, Pat. Does that work? The machine? So yeah, it's an honor to be here in Yarmouth working on this project. It's an important, optimistic project for Yarmouth and for the whole southwest of Nova Scotia and beyond, as Pam has said. Working on cultural projects like this is why I moved back to Nova Scotia 35 years ago, to work on things that have social impact and community impact. So it's great for us to be involved. We're very honored. No one knows what my name is. My dad called me Brian Lyons. My wife calls me Brian MacKay Lyons. Our firm name is MacKay Lyons, Sweetapple. So if anybody's confused, it says MacKay up there, Lyons there. It's actually MacKay Lyons. My dad never quite got that. God bless him. So we're going to quickly take you through a little tour of the process to date since January, when we started working with the community here. So we did first a site study where we studied 3 sites in the town. And then we did a workshop that was about program, a community engagement workshop where a lot of people from various arts backgrounds came and talked about what should be in this place and where it should go on the site. So that was with scissors and colored paper. And then the next workshop we did was 3D, and we had toy blocks, different colors of toy blocks. And we really got into where the form would be on the site, not just in plan, but a kind of 3-dimensional massing. So then we went back and tried to synthesize all of those things that we were told that people wanted into a kind of urban design. Now, I'll tell you right up front, it's not an architectural design yet because it's way too early. Often you'll see renderings way too early that people don't intend to build because they haven't really been designed. So it's better to say we haven't really designed a building yet, rather than to say, to try to bullshit you and show you beautiful images of things that no one intends to build. So we got abstract drawings that are about at the level of urban form, urban design. And it'll take a while for those to become a real architectural design, to cook it properly. So to take you through that little quick tour, I'm going to ask Will Perkins to come up and talk about the site, quickly about the site strategy, the site study that we did. Will is a theater guy, but his first career was, before architecture, was theater, so good background to have.
Is this on? There we go. Okay, thanks for having us, everybody. So as Brian mentioned, we started, this is sort of an overall timeline that we'll be revisiting throughout the night here. And the first part of our scope of work was to look at 3 sites the town had identified for us. And so here are the 3 sites. We've got the Alma Square, the old Odeon Theatre, and the existing tourist bureau. And so all these sites came with some strengths and challenges for each one, and they were there were some complementary programs that came with them. So for example, a new tourist bureau could have been incorporated into that site. Alma Square comes with some possibilities for public space, which were exciting. And the Odeon is a chance to kind of fill in a gap in Main Street and revitalize some of those existing facades. So we started to go through the town in context here, so you can see, starting to identify the commercial areas, important civic and cultural places, so we included the Heritage District here, the library, the YMCA, etc. Important government pieces, so these are the kind of things that make up the urban fabric of Yarmouth, and start to look at how these things affect the placement and the potential of these 3 sites. So the ferry terminal being a very important thing. So Alma Square, it's about 68,000 square feet, that's just the site. We were interested in this pedestrian throughway that was off Main Street and its proximity to the art gallery. The Odeon Theatre has Main Street frontage and a view down the street to water. It's about 40,000 square feet, so a little bit more constrained than the other sites. And what we call the Harbor View site here, which is quite large, and again has frontage right on Main and proximity to the ferry. So it's kind of could be a bit of a gateway to the city. We looked at the parking situation in town and identified about, through a study that the town had done, about 1,000 parking spots downtown. And here you can see the 3 sites again. We did a sort of preliminary urban design to tease out the opportunities that these sites presented to us and the challenges as well. And after that process, we were invited to a meeting between the Board of the Arc and the town to present our first thoughts, and council selected Site 1 to move forward. So in preparation for the public engagement sessions, which came next, we had to sort of understand the site a little bit better, and the best way for us to do that is to actually do some very preliminary design work. So this is a sketch that Brian made on the first day on the site. So I think there might be a little, yeah, there we go. So starting to think about how just the orientation of the site, so this is the sun here, so you can see, interested in an idea about a courtyard that has south facing, thinking about ways how we could capture other parts of the Vanguard building into the overall design of the site. And a little bit more detail here, starting to think about things can happen. So this is just us trying to understand the site a little bit better in preparation for the next phase, which Miranda will talk about, which was working with some of the identified stakeholders and really teasing out the program. So here you can see this is the kind of preliminary urban design massing that we put together, identifying the important pieces. So we have public space in the middle here, calling out the AG&S as an important element, and then the potential of either a commercial or an open space that connects this to Main Street.
So I get to present the fun part.
And Miranda's background before architecture was dance. I'm just singing harmony over here.
So in April, we got together with some potential stakeholders to do a workshop. And Brian kind of mentioned it was about program and space on the site. So each group came and we had a board printed out with the site and pieces of paper, different colored pieces of paper to represent the different program elements that we were studying. So there was 4 groups made, and through the next couple hours, everyone worked together to discuss how much program, how much of each kind of different program we needed, where things needed to be situated on site, which programs are related to other ones. And we kind of floated around and did some note-taking and listened in on the different groups. So this is kind of the end of the evening. Each group kind of came up with a different scheme and actually presented each scheme to the entire group together. So then we went back to the office, and this kind of becomes our interpretation of the schemes that everyone came up with. So we looked at where the theaters were located, where the entry was located, where people had their courtyards situated. And there was a lot of similarities that came out between all 4 schemes. Might be hard to see here, but when we kind of pulled it all together, this was kind of a 3D, just similar to the previous scheme we did, looking at those 4 schemes in 3D. So we brought those schemes together into a summary. So you can see how it's changed significantly from the first time we looked at the site with the input from everyone at the workshop. So this takes us forward to July, where we did workshop 2 with some potential stakeholders as well. And as Brian mentioned, there was a board, again, given to each table, and this time we had blocks, so we were working in 3D this time. Again, we had program that was relating to the different colored pieces of wood, and we had some paper that was green that represented public areas outside, green space. So this time the groups kind of shuffled, so we had different dynamic at each table, and worked again for the next few hours on understanding a little bit more about form. And again, where it was going to be situated on site, talking about program, and how it was all connected. So this is what we ended up getting. There was a lot of topic about glass. Everyone was really interested in being able to see through this building. And again, we were able to take these 4 different schemes and bring them back to the office. And these are our sketches that our interpretation of those 4 schemes, which brings us to our summary scheme, which I believe Brian's going to speak to.
Okay. Thanks. I got a mic here, so hopefully I'm not too close to that one. So this is the result of those workshops in terms of a plan, and I don't think it has a laser, does it? Oh, yeah. Okay. So all through the workshops, there were different ideas about where the performance spaces will go. We say performance spaces, not just theaters, because it could be theater, it could be dance, it could be music, it can be lectures, it could be other things, right? Because this is supposed to be a multi-purpose, diverse complex. So in this drawing, that's Main Street right here, and these are the buildings along Main Street. That's where the Art Gallery in Nova Scotia is. This is Alma Square. This is First Street, Second Street, and Collins Street. So the main gathering places moved around on the site, and working from earlier programs for a project like this, we knew that there needed to be probably ideally in the long run 2 gathering spaces, 2 performance spaces, 1 large one and 1 medium-sized one for smaller performances. So we've hung on, everybody has basically put all of the program around these 2 sides, making a bigger courtyard than we thought initially, because the 3rd side of the courtyard is already the shops on Main Street, and we already know there's a cafe right now that goes right through. So the idea that, you know, use what's already there as part of the architecture. So instead of building a building along this side of the site, let that be it, and let the project feed and be fed by the Main Street commercial and reinforce that commercial. The Vanguard site is here, and it seemed like from the workshops that this was a great place for various things. One of the things was that kept coming up was visual arts, that the proximity, Alma Square proximity to the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, the idea that there could be studio space all along Alma Square, and that the visual arts would combine with the performing arts that way. So again, we're using something across the street as part of the architecture of this project. So the project is bigger than its own site. So again, south is here. There's a general idea in everybody's scheme about an implied diagonal from Alma through this way. So you can have an entry to this project off of Collins Street. You can have an entry to this project off of Main Street. One of the great things about this site is it has no back. It's a difficulty too, because things need backs, right? But it has, 4 fronts, which is fantastic. If this was a commercial project, you'd say, wow, surface for exchange. The more surface for commerce, the more valuable the site. So this is a very valuable site culturally. This is basically the summary of what everybody has said to us. Now, all the schemes have a public open space, a courtyard. And it gets south light. And it's a microclimate. So that means even in the wintertime, it's a protected place. It's not some kind of windswept place in the suburbs. It's actually an urban place with wind-protected, sun-trap. So we have, I guess, a philosophy that, was it Daniel Burnham said, make no small plans? Other people would say, think globally, act locally. So we're going to show you some pretty swell precedents next because we think it's important to dream big. I said to someone the other day when I was in Africa, it's important to have your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground at the same time. We have this idea that our binary minds, that if you're a dreamer, you can't be practical. If you're practical, you can't be a dreamer. We can dream and we can be practical. So, I spent my life, being a professor and kind of working around the world and being inspired by the great places in the world. And why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we be? And at the same time saying, no, this is a great place in the world too. So, we've got this idea about a public space. It could be this great with a loggia around it or a colonnade around it. And so these kinds of ideas about making urban space that come up in our workshops. Another great precedent for a public space surrounded by a loggia is the great mosque in Cordoba, which I think is the most beautiful building in the world. And of course it has a church plunked down in it. And of course you could say in the case of this project, maybe the church is the theater, the big theater, the anchor. Other places were in cities, this is Florence, where there's a sort of loggia in the middle of town, and this is where everybody goes, in this case to sell things or to gather, public gathering. So there's a whole history of loggias in architecture being kind of public gathering. Miranda said in the workshops, we never had enough clear glass toy blocks. Everybody kept saying, you got any more of those clear ones? Because everyone has this idea that a public building, especially in today's democratic world, or we want it to be, at least, it's important for institutions to be transparent. Next weekend, we're opening the Beaverbrook Gallery extension that we designed in Fredericton. And it was a mausoleum for art, and the public never went in there, and school kids never went in there, and people who weren't aficionados never went in there. Well, we just took a piece of stone, lifted it, and you can see right through it. And it opens next week, right? So the idea that this is a transparent place is really key to its publicness, right? And we think of the theaters or the performance spaces inside as being these figural objects like this sculptural thing. Now, every theater is kind of like that. I mean, so, the idea that you have a big public shed, and inside that shed are these figural elements. This is in Toronto. This is a theater complex in Toronto, all made out of brick. We thought brick was interesting because Yarmouth is historically that brick town, right? It has some great brick architecture downtown. This is actually a building we did at Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario. But there's a kind of social agency in all of these public buildings that we've done to make, like there was no program for a place to gather in here, but thousands of people go in this space every day because it's optimistic about gathering, you know? So I think a lot of the schemes that people were doing in the workshop were really emphasizing this loggia, this glass loggia where people gather, see and be seen. This is a library we did at University of Toronto, which also has a theater in it. They call it the Shiny Copper Penny at U of T. This is the Truro Library that we just finished working on. And it was an act of will against a lot of criticism to put the new library, the Hance Library, in the center of the town. A lot of people wanted it out in the suburbs. And the town was dying. And so we argued hard that we should put it in the center of town, make a town square, put a skating rink in the middle of that town square, restore the normal college, which was an important heritage building, was going to be knocked down. And so we did it. So now there's you look at the people in that public space. This was last winter, right? So that was the most dead place in the world. So the idea of revitalizing the downtown is a kind of an argument it's hard to argue with. Other public gathering spaces like Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto, which are used through the whole year. You know, the famous Rockefeller Center Plaza in New York does that. Dream big, right? Here's Lincoln Center in New York. And you know that, again, it's 3 theater spaces built with loggia around a public space that happens to be on Broadway, which is not a bad start. If you're going to have a public space, should be off Broadway. But you know, you go to the opera in one of these, you go to other kinds of performances in other ones. So you have 3 public spaces around a courtyard. So the type, not the budget, but the type is relevant. So again, there's our kind of diagram of the kind of 2-armed scheme using the context to make the 2 arms across the road. We made the whole site a grid. Now, why do you do that? Why would you draw a grid? First of all, head in the clouds, feet on the ground. A grid means structure, a rational structure. You've got parking, you've got structural bays, and it makes sense to start with a grid. But you remember the mosque in Cordoba had this big grid, and the grid is a very democratic space. People in some of the workshop teams, you know, almost everyone said there should be a big public foyer, big loggia. You know, the Paris Opera House has a big loggia. The loggia is better than the theater, right? Everybody goes to Paris Opera House just to be in the lobby. So here's what it is now, and you can see the historic district just behind, which is an important piece of this. You see the brick Main Street. So first thing we're saying is we should build a full layer of parking so we don't lose the parking that's already on the site. That's expensive parking. Surface parking is cheap. We know that. So there's 115 cars that you can fit on the site in one level of parking. And it's really not even so much excavation because there's a story in the slope of the city block that is the Alma Street site. So you really don't have to even dig very much to do this. So what do? You create a square on top of it. You put your structure, frame, your rational structural system. You make that public space on top. Now we've made the whole floor of this thing brick. We said Yarmouth's a brick town. Why not have the brick in the square, and why not have the brick indoors too in the lobby, so that there's really no difference between being in the lobby and being in the public space outside. And then all those little ants are humans. So there's the brick stuff in the town adjacent to us that reinforces that idea. Yarmouth is a brick town. Brick is a kind of moderately priced material. It's a good material, but it's not titanium, you know. So we said, let's have some, for lack of, it's a placeholder idea, but let's say the public pieces, those sculptural pieces that are those performance spaces could be made out of brick also, so that they come out of the ground and relate to Main Street. The community around it, though, is a wooden neighborhood with a very different scale, you know, like 3-story scale, wood construction. And we thought, well, in one sense, we need to relate to the Main Street. In another way, we need to relate to the Heritage District, which is an amazing thing you've got, by the way, here in Yarmouth. Whenever I bring people to Yarmouth, they're just amazed by the homes that are in Yarmouth, you know, that aren't in any other town. They are in other towns, but not so many. So there were ideas in the workshop about adding housing over the Vanguard piece, or a boutique hotel, or whatever. So some residential stuff. Jane Jacobs, you know, talks about eyes on the street, that you need people living downtown to have a real vital downtown. So, you know, maybe, you know, who knows, maybe if there is housing over there, or if that piece gets to happen, it could happen as a private piece, as a piece of real estate development that brings residential. Underneath that, there was a strong consensus in the workshops about studio space. You know, a kind of incubator, visual arts incubator space with storage at the back and infrastructure and flexible space. And of course, it has a loggia in front, like those images in Florence. People in the workshops talked about this big loggia having, this big indoor loggia having other breakout spaces within it. So different cultural groups could rent different rooms or use different rooms. And the place would not just be one big empty space, but it would have smaller spaces in it too. We're thinking that the wooden bits should be on the side of the historic neighborhood that wraps around the site. And this bar is just a placeholder for all the things you're going to need: studios for dance, studios for music, studios for drama, offices, all the things, the secondary spaces that are necessary to have the performance spaces that are on the ground. Community spaces, community group space. So you put it all together and you get this diagram. Remember, it's a diagram. It's very abstract. We don't know if it's got pitched roofs. We don't think it's yellow. You know, it's just a diagram about where things should go according to the community input that we've had so far. And then we did a couple of images just to let you know that we can do them when the time is right. It's too early. It's too early to do pretty images, but we got a wicked group of young architects in the office who, I mean, we're working on this today, right? So this is an image in the courtyard of that bridge building. That's the bridge to the historic neighborhood behind. And you can see that building has a glass foyer, like a modest version of Lincoln Center. And you've got a theater in there, a performance space that might be made out of brick, might not be made out of brick, it may be made out of wood. Yarmouth's a brick town, and Yarmouth County is the shipbuilding place, right? So wood and brick's not a bad guess. So that you can see the neighborhood behind through the gate. And this is looking at the stair. Remember I said there's a one-story drop across the site. And so when you're coming up Elma, you can step up over the parking into the public space. And what you're looking at right now, the building that says Arts, is basically the fly tower portion of a performance space that's on Collins Street. So you're seeing into that loggia. that I was talking about. So when it comes to fundraising time, we can help a lot with this, but we need more input. We need more, it needs to be designed, you know, so that the images can be real images, not cynical images of things you don't intend to build, but real images of things you do intend to build. It needs a lot more community input, a lot more design than we've had a chance to put in it so far. But we think that we can help a lot with the fundraising process as we move along, if you'll have us. So that's kind of it. Hopefully it reflects what people thought they were talking about in the workshops. There's a question right here.
Can you wait till, sure. Do you mind? Then we'll.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you, Will. Okay, so we're almost there. So the, there's words on the screen. Project next steps. So basically, and it just says it here, the project will have multiple phases, of course, because you have to go, each project phase will have goals that we have to meet in order to get to the next step. And that's the way every project works. So this is the project life cycle as we're seeing right now, and understanding, you know, this is just very, very high level, okay? We haven't dug down into this. So today, I guess we're at phase 0, where, you know, we invite the public to take a look at the concept vision, and thank you, MacKay Lyons. How'd you like that?
Thank you.
I learned quickly, okay? So the presentation of the concept vision, the arts and culture community space needs identified, or as identified in as much as we have done those 2 first consultations, and the site is selected. When we get to phase 1, the feasibility modeling, so in this phase, we identify project programming assumptions and scenarios. What will it look like? You know, what does this programming look like? What do we need? Those pieces. And we start to develop the financial model, which includes, as you can see on the board there, the capital cost estimates, operational support requirements, so labor, indirect costs, other costs, financial statements by scenario, and an independent organization would carry out feasibility modeling scope of work. So, of course, the town doesn't do that any more than we draw those beautiful renderings, if that's what you call them. So thank you for that. Parallel, because we can do 2 things at once. We work on the board structure and the governance piece, because that will be inherently important as we go forward to work on what the board will look like and the governance model. And every step of the way, engage with the community and arts and culture stakeholders through the entire process. So phase 2 is the fundraising phase. That's the fun phase. So we engage all levels of government. That includes municipal, provincial, federal levels of government, private sponsors, and the community in fundraising efforts. Much like any other major project would take place, so all the fundraising is on the table. Parallel with phase 2, we do the Arts and Cultural Board will engage with the community and stakeholders in the fundraising efforts. So we do that in parallel, so the community's engaged. And phase 3, the detail and design tendering and construction phases. So the services will be procured to transparent and fair tender. So the town, we're bound by certain, I don't want to call them restrictions, but we have rules that we have to go by, so we can't just pick. We have to go out there and do tenders and all those pieces, requests for proposals, and all those pieces that we do with everything that we put forward. So that will be phase 3, so we will be looking for the detailed design, tendering, and construction. And parallel to that, the same piece where the stakeholders and community continue to be engaged in the process. Whoops, and then phase 4 was the construction, obviously. So on most of your seats, you probably have a piece of paper. Some of you may not have gotten it, but there are some still floating around. And it's our newest engagement tool, and we absolutely love it. It's called Get Involved Yarmouth. And so you just have to go to www.getinvolvedyarmouth.ca, and it'll bring you right up to this screen. And what you have to do once you get here is you have to register or sign in, register, and it will ask you basically, I think it's 4 questions. I'm going by memory, but it'll ask you your email, your age, range. What else was on there? Your postal code, so we know where folks are from. So just general questions like that for you to be able to go in. And and so what's happening here on this site is you'll go in and you'll be able to be updated as the project goes along. So as we get information, we'll post it, and we'll keep the community updated. You just simply have to, and actually I think I signed up for something today that says, as things are updated, is that correct, Natalie? As things are updated, you will get an email or you will get a notification that says, you know what, go take a peek because there's something new on there, which is great because some of us don't have the time to just go in every day or 10 times a day or whatever the time frame is. So the idea is to do the public engagement in such a way, and I'll say this on, let me just look at this screen here. So you can see on the right-hand upper side, you'll see Yarmouth Waterfront Development Action Plan. There's a meeting tomorrow evening about that. So the town can put on the major projects where we know that you know, we need to talk to the public about it. So we will put those on there, and there could be 1, there could be 5. It depends on what's going on at the time. So you can go in and get updated there. There we go. So the other piece is there's I think when you go onto this site under the Arts and Culture Center piece, that it will ask you if you want to do a survey. So you can go on and do the survey. You can only do it once, unlike other surveys where you can go on seriously 100 times, and you can only do this once, and it will identify you, and so you can only go in once and do that. And then the other piece is questions, because we understand fully that there are a million questions with a project like this, of this magnitude, you know, with all the pieces falling in place, that everybody has questions. And we want to be able to answer the questions. And basically, I think it says it best here, the many conversations that are happening in the community, and we understand that your dinner table, your coffee shops, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you know what, I go right back to the ferry. I remember a time when you couldn't go to Tim Hortons unless the conversation was about when are we getting the ferry back. So this project of such a magnitude that those types of conversations are happening all over the place. And what we want to do is make sure that people have the facts. And so what happens is you just write in your question, and it may take us a little bit of time because we won't be on there every day or every minute, you know, responding to you. It's not Facebook. It's not Facebook, but you will have answers in, we want to try for within 48 hours. It may be an hour, it may be 48 hours, depending on what kind of information we have to find. So there was something else I was going to say about that. So basically, we can't hear all of the conversations, the ideas, the questions that come out of all your discussions. So it's a really great idea for you to go on there and ask your questions and continue to be updated on that piece. I did want to say this, that this site is the town of Yarmouth has Get Involved Yarmouth, but this is monitored by a company. I don't even know where they are, Natalie. I know that they have offices all over the world. Okay, so they're in BC and they're watching. So they monitor everything 24/7 just to make sure that it's a safe, respectful conversation that's happening. It's not even a conversation, it's the question. So just to make sure that that's done in a respectful manner, and you will be asked Just like anything else you go into on a computer, you'll be asked if you please read the terms of reference, and it'll just give you a little bit more information in there. So, okay, and it says here, the safe, respectful place to participate in town projects, where you have the option to register to contribute or just sign up to keep informed, so you don't have to go in and do the work that it's asking, but I would encourage you to do that. And whatever engagement we do online at this site, we'll also do offline in public places for everybody to have a voice. So we understand everybody doesn't have a computer. Everybody maybe can't access it and do it, like some others can. So we're going to do our level best to make sure that whatever information we have is given out in a number of ways, but this will be one of those ways. So, and inherently important that your input will inform council's decision-making. So don't be afraid to go on and ask questions and all those pieces. All right, so we're good there. All right, so did I cover it all, Natalie, do you think? Okay, Natalie runs the show with these. So we're gonna do questions now, and they've set up 2 microphones there. So Jeff, did you want to come up? I don't know where you went. It's right down there. Okay? And Brian and I'll sit at the table. The 3 of us can sit, and maybe I'll just, yeah, can we move it more central? Yes.
So people can hit Jeff with their tomatoes? Sure. So we can be more seen.
So Larry, am I good to move this microphone down on that table?
I'll shut this one off.
I just want to say thank you, Brian, for taking on this project with us. I'm really excited about that. It's not really a question. I just wanted to compliment a couple of things you said. One of the concerns for Neil and I, being significant stakeholders in the Conservation District, is that you have identified and recognized there were no back walls. Part of our struggle in developing in the district has been that parking lot has always severed us from the downtown core and the waterfront, and the approach to our beautiful conservation district has been compromised because of that vacant lot. And the other thing that you said that is really important to us is that you recognize the north side of the property, Collins Street, and the east side need to work in harmony with the abutting properties in the district and the wooden architecture that exists there. So I love the idea of the glass design on the south wall. It's brilliant. The other walls, working with the community, I think are going to really tie it all together, so I want to compliment you on that.
I'd like to ask, I guess, 2 both simple and possibly impossible to answer questions. One is, how much is this likely to cost? And the second is, what would you expect the timetable to be?
So the next phase of the work is the feasibility, and so we're engaging cost estimating consultants to look at Brian's concept and try and put some numbers to it in terms of capital cost. We're also engaging consultants to look at and say, okay, if this is generally the size and the program, what's it going to cost to operate? And so those are questions that will be answered over the next phase of work. So we don't have the answers tonight. The other part of your question was timeline. And so, the next phase of the work won't take a horribly long time, I think a matter of a couple of months. But then we get into the fundraising phase. And that is a phase of the work that we are not in control of, right? Because we will depend on significant contributions from other levels of government. We will depend on the contributions of the public, to contribute. And so There is no firm timeline on the project as a result of, we can only control what we control. But the key thing is that we're moving forward, and we're going to continue to move forward with the project. And, great things take time. And so we're just asking for everyone's engagement, patience, and understanding that these things don't happen overnight.
I just had a couple of questions, and I'm not involved with the arts anymore. At one time, I was manager of the ARC back in '83, maybe on the board for 2 or 3 years after that, but recent years not involved. So I'm an outsider in this process, and I'm just wondering about the downtown sites. The site where the Capitol Theater was, did you consider that site including the YMCA? Because I hear, talk that at some point that may need another use.
We considered all 3 sites.
Yeah.
I don't know that we looked at it in conjunction with the YMCA. It certainly, everything was on the table.
Right.
And it's a big piece of property. So
Yes.
we did consider that.
I guess my thoughts are around visibility, and I really think that Main Street frontage has a lot of value. So I was hesitant when I first heard the discussion about where it's going.
So a couple things. I'm going to let Brian take this because he's better at articulating it from an architectural standpoint. But when we look up, I think we all get a little bit excited when we go to Alma Square and we see what it's become. That it's a gathering place. That somebody went in and painted the red carpet there. That people gather. That it's central to the downtown core. And I think what happens with the drawings that Brian's done thus far is that it just continues, I want to call it that excitement. It continues that excitement where you're going in there and you can see it and it's wide open and you're seeing the steps and you're starting to see the pieces. And from the Collins Street entrance as well, that you can see the building. It would be as drawn so far. I mean, and nothing's written in stone. Some of it's written in brick, apparently. Yeah. But you can see it. It stands out. It stands out enough, and it's such a beautiful piece that it will be there, and you will notice it. Right. And I appreciate what you're saying about the Main Street. We all love our Main Street sites.
I thought was important. I had 2 other questions, if it's okay.
Certainly.
The next one was just around the process till now. As a person in Yarmouth that's not involved with the art scene at all, I read the Vanguard and followed the discussions, but I didn't feel that there was a point, or maybe I missed it, that there was input sought from the general public that weren't involved with the art.
Okay.
Or with the art scene.
Okay.
It just seems like the process has rolled along and rolled along. Wonderful results and a lot of good work, but did I miss something?
No, I don't think you missed anything. I think that, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know all of the history, but I know in 2009 that an awful lot of people gathered for the downtown, for the blueprint, and that this piece was put on the table. And so there was a lot of discussion from the community at that point. And there was another time, what was it? And what happened then?
2002, we did the assessment of whether or not it would fit the Mariner Center.
Okay, that's right. The 2002 piece where the question was asked, would it fit at the Mariner Center? And the answer was that it needed to be downtown. So the community was engaged in 2002 and 2009. And just to be clear, so that we all understand what happened this time, it was stakeholders. It was who is going to take most advantage of this building as far as programming and those types of pieces. So, and again, I said, when I first started, the tremendous amount of stakeholders that are available in this community alone, everything from theater to dance to to
Right.
musicians, visual arts. I'm going to leave somebody out, and it's disconcerting to leave somebody out, but arts and crafts and culture and all those pieces. And we just want to get those people in the room to say, is this doable? What do you see?
Right, and
So the
that's
intent-
certainly the
Yeah.
most important part of it, but I just thought that I must have missed something because I didn't
Nope.
see an opportunity to talk before now.
Nope.
And the other piece, and you mentioned Tim Horton and the discussions and stuff. I'm a regular at Tim Hortons, so I hear
Yes.
all the discussions.
Yeah.
One of the discussions that I hear time and time again with new facilities, not just this one, is what are the annual operating costs going to be, and how many staff are you going to have, and all those sorts of things. I know that it's the next step that you get to that, but I think those are the questions that are circulating now.
Yeah, and certainly they are, and I think Jeff just spoke to that we haven't gotten
Yeah.
there yet, but we engage somebody specifically to do those pieces, to help us work
Right.
through those. So
Okay.
not quite there yet.
All right. And will there be any future opportunities for the general public to have input?
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely.
Yeah, so our goal is to have a lot of engagement throughout this entire process. Pam talked a few minutes ago about the Get Involved Yarmouth platform, the online platform. That is intended only to mirror or mimic what we do in person. And so we intend, going forward, to be in front of people, with people, meeting with people, and talking to people about this process. We need to engage the community. At the end of the day, this is not about a building. This is about a community, and
Right.
building a community and revitalizing a downtown and building and strengthening the arts and culture in our area. So if we fail on the people side, we'll fail on the project.
Right. I guess one more comment, and then I'll sit down and let someone else have a turn. But in terms of public input, I think there has to be an awareness that there are lots of seniors and people that aren't comfortable with computers, and the best way to have engagement is like this.
Yeah.
I think you need these kinds of opportunities to let people speak.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And I did say that just before I sat down, that the Get Involved Yarmouth is great for people that have computers, that have access, that know how to use it. But there are folks that don't know how, don't have
Right.
them, or simply are better in person. And that works. So you're absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, certainly, Brian.
Location. Also on the process, you got good questions or comments. I think of the process like a snowball, and it grows, and the amount of people that are involved grow. And this is an important night tonight because we crossed the line into the general public, and I just see it as a natural process of growing the conversation and adding to the snowball. So I don't think, my sense, being kind of, in a way, new to the situation, I don't think there was anybody had an idea of blocking input. I think it's about growing it. So maybe that wasn't for me to answer that one. Point about the visibility of the site is a really good one. It's troubling to us always, and so far, and this particular site is the most central. So when we did the kind of walking radius kind of studies, this was the one that was closest to the center of energy, the epicenter of the town. It also has 4 street frontages, so it has a lot of surface area to communicate with what's next to it. We felt that there are 3 good sites. I have to say that those 3 good, and there are probably more good sites, but those 3 sites that the town could see getting a hold of are all good sites. It breaks my heart, for instance, to think that those brick buildings next to the Odeon site are going to fall down or have to be torn down, because that's what makes Main Street. All right, that's great news. All right. Geez, where's my business card? No. So they're all good sites. But this thing about how visible things need to be can be turned around. Think of Halifax having Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. You can't find it. It's a world-famous art school, once considered the best art school on the planet, and when it was the best art school on the planet, which I don't quite think it is anymore, but you couldn't find it. There was a little side door on a side street that took you to a little staircase that took you up to another labyrinth. You couldn't find it. So I think there can be, I'm not saying this site is hard to find. I think it is pretty easy to find, but I think you can turn that question around. I think that if you discover this site, you take a step off Main Street or a step off Collins Street and say, oh, wow, surprise, pretty cool. I think that can be cool too. So I've kind of got my own head around the idea anyway that it's not necessarily a negative, you know, that it's this jewel that you have to find. It's not that hard to find. It's pretty close to everything.
I can't find Neptune in the city. I'm always up one street or down a street. Yes, sir.
I got a couple questions. My first question is like the auditorium where the performances and stuff are going to take place. What kind of size are you guys looking at for how many people for seating wise and for the venue? What are you aiming at?
I think 500. Was that the number that was, because it was consistent, what's that? Yeah, for the big one, 500, and was it 200 for the second? 500 for the big one, 200 for the second.
Okay, very interesting. Cool. And it was like 158 parking stalls, just to reiterate them.
Oh, I don't remember.
115
115.
under the courtyard.
Oh, okay.
But then there's, you know, if you add the on-street parking and the other town parking lots that are within that 5-minute walking radius, turns out to be quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay. And the other question was like at the end of the day, what is the name of the building going to be and who's going to decide the final? Sorry.
I know. Yeah.
We
don't
I
know.
come from Edmonton and we have Rogers Place and like I would
No.
hate to see it like that. So
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
And,
Mike.
and I can tell you, unless I'm missing something, we have no level idea. We haven't even thought about that piece. We really haven't. But you're right, every community you go in, they have a big sponsor. Yeah.
Okay.
So, great question. Thank you. Yep, right up to the microphone there, Jer.
Good evening. For those that don't know me, my name is Jerry Curry. For your information, I always wondered whether I was a come from away, and a very nice old lady who has since passed away says, oh, no, dear, you're not a come from away, you're just severely tainted. I've lived most of my life in Canada's large major cities. I was born into the armed forces, my dad was in the armed forces, I was in the armed forces, so I've lived all across. I've been in many of the buildings that you showed in your pictures when I've traveled around the world. Most of the buildings that you showed in Toronto I've been in and used. So I know where you're coming from. I also trained as a professional photographer, and in my retirement I'm busy as a nature and landscape photographer. So I am a member of the arts community. I fully support this project, and I fully support your vision. Unfortunately, I think you have chosen, without a doubt, the worst location possible. And I say that for many, many reasons, but let me give you just a few reasons. This is the principal, you know, aside from my good friend here saying that it's an empty lot, it's not an empty lot. It is the primary parking lot for downtown Yarmouth. And if you take that away, granted, you're going to put 190 odd, 150 odd underground parking spots there. First of all, most people in this town are not used to parking underground, and it's a much more difficult and complicated process, which can result in a lot more damage to vehicles. Second, if it's so expensive to build, I suspect that you'll probably charge for it. People don't want to pay. What we need to realize is, aside from the arts world, Yarmouth is also the regional business center. People come to downtown to bank. They come down to see their insurance companies. They come to see their lawyers. They need a place to park and go in and do that business and then leave. If you create all that underground parking, you will never be able to have a matinee performance because there'll be no place for anybody to park because all those parking spots will be taken by people who are doing their banking and all the other work. Yes, there is roadside parking, and yes, there is another small parking lot, but they're all full too. So my perspective is always, if you're going to produce a world-class facility like this, it should add to what we have, not take away. And what you're doing is taking away a good chunk of infrastructure in order to add. So I personally really like the first site, although I imagine with the terrain there may be a problem. But I mean, the mayor alluded to the fact that we're a fishing community. Well, surely this should be somewhere where you can see the harbor or see some water or something. We need the parking lot. And the other thing that you commented about is that you're right beside the historic district. And the historic district is fabulous and we really need it. But the buildings that you're butting up against are not historic buildings. The real historic buildings are at least a block further in, so you're not going to be beside them anyway. So I really suggest that we look at another location. The last comment I'll make is if we are wildly successful with this, and I'm sure there are other people here who have been to Stratford or have been to Niagara-on-the-Lake, you have no room to expand if you build there. And we may need to expand if we're really successful. Thanks.
So just so I understand correctly, up till now you've had 2 by invitation only meetings, and it looks like you've decided on this spot. Doesn't it normally happen that you would send a letter to adjoining property owners on such a major decision of this type of development, where those property owners could come in and give their opinion, what they think are going to be the problems for them? I bring it up because we do own a big commercial building that borders that parking lot, and I was lucky enough to rent out those spaces to commercial businesses based on their clients using that parking lot. So even if we accept the finished product is going to maintain every single parking spot that you find today, what is the expected construction time frame? And we all know if it's 2 years or 18 months, there will be no parking for that time, as the whole place will be a construction site. What do you do with those people in those 18 months? Where do their clients park? I'm sure we've all seen in the news what's happened in Halifax around the new convention center and all the businesses that went broke during this construction phase of that. What do? Do you offer to supplement money to the people in those businesses that are adversely affected? What do you do for that solution? I think that part has been missing, that the people with adjoining buildings have to have some input in how this is going to work for them.
So I'll take a quick stab at the parking question, particularly the angle of during construction, because that clearly, if parking is being replaced, it's going to be a period of time though when it's under construction and parking will be displaced. So the town has and actively does look for opportunities to purchase land within the central business district. Recently have purchased a couple of nearby properties with the idea that those will become additional parking in the central business district. And so there is that way of adding or supplementing the parking. The other thing that we do is we have partnerships with a number of downtown businesses. And so if you're familiar with parking in downtown, if you don't park on the street, you often will park in a parking lot. Well, there's only 3 parking lots that the town actually owns. The other parking lots that we sell permits for, that you have time limited access to, are privately owned. So we establish shared agreements with existing property owners so that public has access to parking spaces that they may have that are surplus to their needs. So we're actively seeking to enter more of those partnerships so that when the facility is built and you have, let's hope, increased demand for parking in the evening and so on, there will be convenient spaces nearby, if not on site, nearby in either other public lots or in private lots that people are graciously making available for the community.
I'm not sure if this is going to come out right, but I know the last couple of comments about the location, on the surface of it, it sounded like my background's in urban design. I'm an urban planner, so I think sprawl is bad. I put my cards on the table. So I think if we continue to just build in the greenfield sites around the town, and we don't believe in the town enough to build in the center of the town, it just dies. Used to be, people believed in the idea of a town, believed in the idea of the good city, and believed that it was worth the pain to create it. I think this is a situation where it's worth a little bit of pain to make a real town and not just keep leapfrogging out, into the fields around the town. All the great cities in the world are the way I'm talking. They invested in their core, increased the density in the core, increased the level of urbanity in the core, mixing in the core. And cities that have abandoned their cores and just leapfrog out to the countryside die. And there's lots of those in North America. And I just think it's a wrong sentiment. I agree with everything you've said about the adverse effects on shop owners, temporary loss of parking. These are good points. But I think we have to believe in the future more than that. We have to
Sure,
believe in the town.
I understand no pain, no gain and all that, but what do you tell the 6 hairdressers standing around with no customers? What are they supposed to do for 2 years? I don't know how you work past that. To me, any of the other sites would have been better.
I wasn't really trying to argue with that, because I get that. I do understand that. I know those merchants on Argyle Street, some of them, and how awful it's been during, the building of that giant.
From what I understand,
thing.
they've shut, they've closed businesses, they had to sell to each other.
Yeah.
It's turned into a real mess.
So I wasn't trying to negate what you were saying, but to put out a different value system. Say that we have to be optimistic and build a fine town like we used to know how to do, and we've forgotten how to do, unfortunately.
I'm just going to add one little piece to that, and I understand what you're saying as well, Randy. But boy, wouldn't I love to be one of those property owners that has a piece of property around that Nova Center now. Because I've said, probably shouldn't say it publicly, but boy, are they going to give a percentage over to the city of everything they've gained? Like this, what a tremendous opportunity for so many people. And as Jeff said, we are going to do our level best to make sure that there's parking. I think that, I don't want to put anybody on the table, but I'm going to do it anyway. So the response when SIP put his bump out in was wild. It was, we cannot believe that this is, and I'm being genuine here, like we can't believe that the town would allow them to do that because it took away 2 parking spots. And I mean it. And then we allowed another one, and we allowed another one. And I think because when Brian's talking about building, I'm thinking about the bump outs. That if I had a nickel for everything, for every time somebody responded to how we would never be able to deal with the bump outs, I could probably pay for the art center myself. And I'm not trying to be funny, but it's so difficult to be in a spot where your vision is so strong that you just see it so strongly that you can feel it like you're just there, and like you said, you have to go through the pain to get it there. And maybe I shouldn't throw this out there, but the days of parking exactly in front of the spot that you're going They aren't going to always be there. But as Brian has said, did you say that we replace all those spots? It's just underground? Yeah, so yeah, no, and I didn't, because I don't do numbers very well, but the numbers match. So in the end, it's just to get us there. And we have, or we're at least in the process, I don't know how far we've got about purchasing the properties for more parking. Did we purchase those? Yeah, we did that.
I may have one more for
Yeah.
sale, then you might be able to buy
Yeah.
mine
Yeah.
and start the parking.
Okay, thank you.
How's it going? So my name's Stephen Howitt, young guy from Halifax, moved down here. I'm gonna pop up a couple people's bubbles. I bought the building down on Main Street, and the town's not buying it from me, so that site's gone, where the old Odeon is. I have some great plans to fix it up, to revitalize it. I also purchased Toots, and I have an agreement with Byron to purchase that parking lot. What's going to go in there in the next few years will surprise you. I've invested a lot in downtown Yarmouth. I have another business down there as well, and I believe in what the town council is doing in revitalizing and focusing on the downtown. That's why a lot of my money has been going into the downtown core. And from what the town is looking for from the Arts Center, Alma Street is probably one of the best spots in town to be able to accommodate what they're looking for. Now, I do have concerns about the underground parking, and something you mentioned, Brian, about not digging down far enough. Have you accommodated for the fact that the majority of people in Yarmouth and surrounding areas drive pickup trucks? You know, they're fishermen, they're construction workers, they're roofers. Those pickup trucks require a significant amount of space to be able to drive in an underground parking lot to park those trucks. Have you accommodated, you know, it's fantastic we have 115 parking spots for, you know, a Ford Fusion or, you know, a little dinky car. But to fit a you know, a F-150 in there is a whole nother ballgame, right? Yeah.
Are designed for larger vehicles, like you allow on average a 10 by 20 berth so you can get your truck, or I can drive my truck into the airport parking lot, you know, my Dodge Ram, you know, it works. And if it didn't work, you just scrape off another 6 inches of dirt.
Right.
Go down 6 more inches, you know, but you know, the standards allow for things like that. Wouldn't allow for 3-ton trucks and stuff, but would allow for, you know, the kind of stuff you're talking about. We're not cheating with our counting. We're not using 9 by 18 parking spaces. We're using 10 by 20 ones.
Okay, so you are actually using the proper size.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've seen a couple plans from Halifax that they cheat and they put the little tiny dinky parking spots in. And they're like, we have all this parking, and then when you get there, you're like, okay, what am I gonna fit there, a motorbike? It's just not feasible, right? So if you guys are putting in the proper size parking spots, then you know, that kind of alleviates that
It's
issue.
great news, though, that you're so optimistic about the town and
Well,
putting your money into it.
yeah.
Everything's great.
Well, it's, you know, I came down here and my wife's from Weymouth, and I kind of grew on the town. And you're concerned about that building falling down. It's not. I have had 3 engineers in there now, so we're good, and I'm working with the town and step by step. You know, there will be some delays, and we will have to close down the sidewalk every now and again. Hopefully no more Main Street closures. But yeah, so all in all, you know, what my plan is for downtown really lends to what the town wants to do with Alma Street. And, you know, I have a hobby store right across from the square. And that square, whenever there's an event, like, that's where people go to hang out, that's where people socialize. On a regular basis, there's probably 10 to 15 people in there at any given time, unless it's raining. But, you know, the Art Center, where it's going, I understand people are hesitant about the location, but when you look at the 3 sites that are possible, one is pretty significantly outside of town. The other one is dead center, and then you have one that I'm not giving up. So you're down to 2 possible spots. So realistically, that is probably the best place in town for the center, and you know, it's going to be good. And we are going to go through hardships, just like when we had to do the water main on Main Street, right? I bought Toots like 2 days later than the construction started. Fantastic time to buy, right? But you have to work through that. As a business owner, you have to make precautions for that. Something like this, you're planning, like this isn't something that's going to start in 6 to 8 months. So if you know that your business is going to go down, even so slightly, in a year's time, prepare for that, right? You know, put a little more money aside to be able to pay your employees. Set that expectation that, you know, this is what's going to happen, or plan. Hey, do you know what? I need some more parking. Talk to the businesses around you. Can I rent these 3 parking spots when they're doing construction? Yeah, fantastic. A lot of the people who own properties in Yarmouth are willing to sell you a parking spot for $15 a month. You know, if you're losing, you know, $500-600 a day or a week for 2-3 parking spots, $15 is a good investment for you. So if you're really concerned about, you know, it impacting your business, proactively plan for it. A lot of people in Halifax didn't plan for that renovation. They just said, yeah, sure, something's going to happen, whatever. And they didn't ask for extra parking. They didn't even go to the Halifax board and say, can you give us X amount of parking spots for free? Because we're going to lose this. Nobody pre-planned for it. And as you saw in Halifax, that's what happens. So really people just need to pre-plan and understand that this is what's going to happen, and it's going to take a little bit of time to get it done. And as long as everybody does it, it won't impact us nearly as much as everybody believes. Thanks.
Good evening. Hey, everybody. So it's been all about parking, which is the hot topic. So I'll start there. So there's 115 spaces, and there seems to be a lot of talk about while in construction. But if there's 115 spaces that are predominantly being used now for people who work in this town or come to town to do their banking, what's going to happen when you actually have the large facility there and you still only have 115 spaces, but you have a theater for 500 and a theater for 200 and all these other little arts and dance and pottery shops? Where are all they going to park? Or perhaps where are the people that work in the town or come to the town to do their banking going to park? So that would be my first question, because I really think that it is in the general public's interest to understand better how that's going to happen.
Okay, so I'll start by saying this, that, and I think Jeff said it better than I will, but we've already purchased some properties to create more parking for when this is under construction.
Where are they, Pam?
Yeah, there's some properties on Willow Street.
On Willow Street?
On Willow Street, right behind I want to say behind the Dairy Queen, across from there's 2 decent-sized properties there. And I know that Jeff is talking to business owners to take, because all the spaces, people argue, but we do have a parking guy that goes around and checks on how much is being used. So there are empty spots. You probably know the numbers better than I do, but there are empty spots. We just need to maximize those and then reach out to the business owners and private owners that have spaces to add those to it.
Okay, so I'm going to move off from parking because I'm sure everybody has heard enough about it. And maybe I don't speak for everybody in here, but I don't think that the subject's really actually been satisfied, and I don't think it's going to get satisfied here because I still think it's a large issue. And especially for those who are coming into the town, working in the town, and those who come to the theater to see any type of performance having to park over on Willow Street. I just don't see that as being ideal. And so we'll park it.
Okay.
Pardon the pun. Okay, we'll park that right there.
I just know that if I went to Neptune, the chances of me finding parking within 2 or 3 blocks is...
I don't think we should compare the apples to the oranges, because we are Yarmouth, and and that is Halifax. And
That's-
I really, I loved all the displays of the beautiful places in Paris and Toronto, but once again, just sitting here from Yarmouth, and although I, if you don't know me, have had great big expectations for this town and have done a lot to try to bring people to the town and organize events and bring people here. And so my concern actually drives from that perspective, because I've organized events. And I've seen how hard it is to get people to come here. And it doesn't matter where. It doesn't matter if it's in a state-of-the-art, multi-million-dollar facility, or if it's at the Arc on 76 Parade Street, which nobody seems to be talking about here tonight. And I was really disappointed. First time that I didn't realize that it wasn't even included in any of the three locations. But I understand that goes with the 2002, 2009 dated downtown visualization, as we'll call it. But it's really hard. And I really like to know, from your perspective, economically speaking, I'm not talking social here, because social has a cost. So let's talk about that cost and talk about the economics of where is it that you see that we can even afford this facility this large? You're buying property to build parking. You're going to have to extrapolate land, is the way I understand it. I think there's a man that lives there in that parking lot somewhere. There's businesses that are going to be affected by it. So, like, when you opened up this evening, you mentioned that when you came on a year ago, well, which was the second term for you, Pam, that now we're going to start talking about an arts council, an arts facility. But economically speaking, how much does the arts put in to this area? What does it mean economically? No, don't say, oh, wow, I want a number.
No,
I want a number.
I don't have a number. I don't have a number. I wonder if we can get a number. Can we work on that?
I think it's a very important number, because there's...
It is a very important number because it encompasses everything that we mentioned. It encompasses the visual arts. It encompasses the music that look what you've done. You know.
But you don't know, Pam, what I've done.
No, but I know some of it. So it encompasses the music. It encompasses the dance. It encompasses so much. It's huge. The arts and culture of this community is huge, and it needs to land somewhere amazing.
So a lot of people in the room by the oohs and the ahs are artists and stuff. And I appreciate at that level where the artist is, and the creation and the inspiration and the passion. I'm talking numbers and business. And I'm talking how hard it is to actually even sell seats. I'm talking that. Where are the events? What is it going to cost? If the Chunk of Funk wanted right now to rent an already established facility, I know what it's going to cost, and it's almost affordable that if we could get in there, we could actually put on a show and maybe put a little bit of money in our pockets to make it worth our while. But what is it going to cost us to go here? And are we going to be able to afford it? Or is this going to be like the Mariner Center, where you can't afford it? Those of us who want to do this, who want to have this and have this spot, can't afford to use it. So to me, there's a lot of work to be done there. And you really have to think about, how big do we really need? This is all great. I think it's great. I think it's a nice vision. I'm not sure that I agree with the location. I certainly have concerns with the parking. And I think that really is stemmed from the people who actually work in the downtown. And then they have to start paying for that parking. Or the people who go to the shows and they don't have a place to park. If you did an average of what everybody in the downtown makes per hour, what do you think that number is? And then add parking on top of it. These are the things that some of us as a general public, I don't stand here and talk as an artist or a musician or even an events organizer, because I have all that information in the back of my mind. And I know how many shows I've given away with world famous artists painting live to music to some of the best musicians in Nova Scotia, and I had to give it away. Because it's a really hard thing to fill. So your business plan's missing, and I see in the second phase, I think it was phase 2, you have this market, your feasibility, but I really think that should be up front. And that perhaps there's a lot of work to be done there in terms of exactly how much money do you think that this is going to generate on the back of the taxpayers? I agree with the gentleman over here who asked about the general public, and I was saddened to hear that 2002, I mean, really? That's your general public date? 2009? Maybe it's time to bring the public, and I think the Municipal Act says you have to publicize that. Not on Facebook, not on Twitter, but in the paper, and let people know that those are happening, because I think that the voice of the general public, the taxpayers, need to actually have a piece in terms of what is this going to cost us? And does it need to be this big? Does it need to be this big? Do we need glass windows?
And we don't know that.
My last and final comment and question is directed towards the Municipal Act. It's very specific in terms of what you can and can't do. I'm very interested in why this is being driven by the town. And where is the municipality? Because I haven't heard anything from the municipality, and obviously you're not going to do this alone. And so where are they? And also the Municipal Act says that according to Schedule B, you have to keep your infrastructure projects to what the province has actually specified as priorities. And arts and community culture centers are not on that list. So I'm wondering, along with the local government and municipality of Yarmouth, where's the province? And has the province said that they're going to support you in this venture? It is a question.
So the last question, has the province said they will support this project?
Yes.
No, that's fundraising phase. That's where the ask goes to the province and goes to the federal government. And obviously the project doesn't go, can't go solely on the backs of the taxpayers of the town of Yarmouth. Absolutely not. So the town of Yarmouth needs to be a part of this, right? And the district of Yarmouth probably needs to be a part of this. Provincial, federal, private fundraising, all of that is after we determine what is the right size, what is the cost, is it feasible? Okay, when you check all those boxes, then we go into trying to raise the money. Because if you're the provincial government, you're not going to give us money, right? If the project isn't feasible, if we're not bought in, if we're not showing that the community wants it. Right?
Well, Section 57 of the Act actually says that the municipal body, being the town in this case, would solicit and encourage development. It doesn't say it'll build it. It says it will solicit and encourage the development and building of such infrastructure, including these types of facilities. So it's really interesting when you look at the Act and you see that it's, written that you would solicit and encourage those who want to build it versus being the ones who are building it. And once again, Schedule B does not list art centers in there. So I find it, just from a regulatory legislative position, very interesting that we're at this phase. Because I think that there's obviously been some skipped kind of considerations in terms of where we should be. So nobody's come to the mic to ask about any of the comments that I've made so far in terms of where the town is in terms of this vision and with the ARC. And in Pam, I think in your latest, one of your comments that you had made in a news media release was that you couldn't do this without the ARC. So I'm very interested to know where you are with planning or attempting to facilitate some type of negotiation that may actually bring those two entities actually together in terms of building this center. Because I think your comment said that you couldn't build it without them. It was exactly, you couldn't get the funding without them. And so I think that, as you move forward to feasibility and then in terms of fundraising, I seen on your chart that you have, engaging with them there, but, do you have to wait that long? Like, what's your plan?
So we should all be, I think it just makes sense. We should all be on the same page when we go after fundraising. It just makes sense that that those involved, the stakeholders involved, including the town, including the ARC, including music, you know, the people involved are on the same page, and we're saying, okay, let's do this. This can work if we do it together. So if you're asking where we are with the ARC, is that the question?
Your comment was that you could not achieve this without them, that you could not get the funding without them, which was publicized on CJLS and in the Vanguard. And I'm just wondering, like, you know, is there an actual plan with the town council to make a real good effort in terms of sitting down and trying to build some type of relationship to actually make that happen?
So we have sat down with the ARC board a couple of times, and I can say, because I even remember the date in my head, that on June 23rd, we sent out a letter because the last meeting that we had with the ARC folks, which I believe was Mitch and Sherry and Sandy, the last piece was, what about governance? And we said, we will send you out something on governance. And we sent that out on June 23rd, and it basically said, I can't remember the letter off by heart, but it said, you know what, take a look at this, it's a starting point, and get back to us. So that's where we are.
On June 23rd? Okay, so there's no further plans, it's stifled, it's there, that's where it sits?
It's not that it's stifled, but we need some feedback. So we're more than willing to sit down. We're here.
Okay, I just wanted to ask the question. Thank you.
If I could just address the comment about Section 57 of the Municipal Government Act. That section deals with business and industrial development, and so municipalities are not permitted to operate a business or to operate an industry, industrial business.
So this wouldn't be a business?
No, it's not a business.
There'd be no business at this Arts and Community Center?
There could be business there. We're permitted to be able to lease space so that we could accommodate business, as we have in other buildings that we own, but we can't operate a business. Okay?
It's a nonprofit.
Okay. You know, you're going to start thinking I'm just this naive kid from Arcadia, but about arts and economics, you're absolutely wrong. Arts are the forward guard for economic development everywhere in the world. Cabbagetown started with the arts. Yorkville started with the arts. Every place you can think of that you want to go started with artists moving in. The north end of Halifax, where I live, is the arts place now. Our kids couldn't have sleepovers, you know, because people in the south end of Halifax didn't let their kids do sleepovers at our house.
I didn't say that. I asked what the numbers were. I asked where was this being driven from. It's a valid question. Where's the business plan?
Right, no, there needs to be a business plan.
I understand arts.
Yeah.
And I understand how they drive economy. Well, my question is, how are they driving the economy now that is created what you are presenting to us that you want to build? Why do you want to build it? Why do you want to build it so big? Is there information before the town council and before your firms that would actually justify this design?
One of the things that's going to happen next is with the estimating, the operating costs, the business plan that is essential, is a phasing strategy so that the thing can be right-sized to that you're saying. So of course you're right about that. That has to happen. I always think that you have to draw the dream and then work your way to it, rather than talk about what can't happen and you work your way without a compass. So I remember as a child in being on Main Street in Yarmouth on Saturday night, and you couldn't walk. It was wall-to-wall people. Everybody in the county was downtown on Main Street. So, shopping, seeing and being seen, engaging in public life. There were some fights and things too, but I remember it as a very dense place. So the parking problem must have been a lot worse then. But I'm sad that that doesn't happen like it used to. I think it can again. It can be that kind of a downtown again.
Thank you. A couple of observations, which date back to your original logistics study of, what was that? Was that 09? Mm-hmm. 09, yeah. Much of what we've seen in terms of the glory of arts centers is based in towns and cities that have a catchment area for their potential clientele of hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Several of the photographs in the original acoustics document, as I recall, came from Mont Tremblant, a popular skiing resort just outside of Montreal. Some of the photographic evidence that they said, well, this will revitalize the town. Yay, it might. Who's going to be the clientele? Well, we've got a catchment area of like 3 or 4 million people. You're bound to get some business. Somebody earlier mentioned, this is Yarmouth. What's the population of Yarmouth now? 8,000? Am I right? I don't know. What is it?
6,700.
6,700? Okay, 7,000 then. Let's say, ballpark. So, we got a potential clientele in town of 7,000 people. We've got another catchment area of the tri-counties of perhaps another 50 to 60 more. Where are the people going to come from? Number one. Number two here is that in such an expensive facility, it's not going to be cheap to run. You've got to have security, you've got to have maintenance, heavy-duty maintenance year-round, and so on and so forth. That will drive your tickets up. So I'm going to speak to a very concerned issue of mine, and that is community theater. Where is community theater going to be able to sit with the Sydney Opera House in downtown Montreal? No theater group that I'm aware of at the present time would be able to even think of putting a show on there. Never mind making $1. And the last basic thing that kind of struck me is that everyone's expression tonight on the in favor side is saying, well, this is going to be a magnet. This is going to revitalize downtown. How is that? How is that going to be accomplished just simply by attracting people into the center? You're dealing with a theater. When do theaters operate? 7:30 to 11 o'clock at night? What are the stores going to be open? Are people going to come down to the 3 hours early to the show to have dinner and go shopping? I'd love to see that happen. I'd love to see the business in Yarmouth bloom and blossom, flourish. But is it really realistic to expect that locating an arts center in downtown Yarmouth is really going to accomplish that in a short term? At the cost of destroying an existing institution that has successfully run an arts business for the last 40-odd years.
Okay. Any more questions? Yeah, sure.
I didn't hear an answer.
Oh, right.
I just take a stab at the community theater one, Mr. Cook. I said a little while ago that this is not going to work if we don't do the people thing right. This is, you're right, this is Yarmouth. And we're not going to be able to maintain any kind of arts and culture center based on traveling shows coming in and selling tickets. And Kim has talked about how difficult that is and how painfully disappointing that must be when you bring in world-class entertainment and people don't respond to it. So we need to do our utmost to ensure that local artists, people who are interested in the arts, want to try it, have the opportunity within our local facility. It's about our culture. It's great to bring in acts and to see what other people have mastered and share their art. But we need to develop our own art and find the find the inner artist in everybody. This has to be a broad community facility. I haven't found my inner artist yet, but I'm determined that there might be one in there somewhere.
Trying to get out there.
But seriously, I think local theater, is critically important. When our community comes together at our facility and we support one another, I mean, I think the best activities that happen at the Yark are the local productions, right? They're the ones that draw the crowds, right? So that needs to continue and to be supported and to continue to happen at the new facility. This is not about excluding or doing any damage to an existing organization that has for 35 years done good service in the community. It's about building on that. And, it's going to take a few years to get this done. So, we can be thinking ahead about how it's going to impact our businesses and how it will impact on the arts and culture community, and start planning for the programming of this facility so that more people have opportunities, not fewer.
The thing that is bothering me now is the most recent comments, which seem to be primarily about worrying about the theater. But I really am concerned that it shouldn't be another example of the art, which is a theater production. We bring in, there's people here who do it, half a dozen really good music programs per year. We don't have a facility for it. We have a lot of craftspeople. If they have workshops that they can go to, if there are places for arts, for photographers, for painters, that's in the daytime. That will help keep the downtown alive. We get grants to bring in musicians and for performances. Yes, we get a good turnout from the local community. We need a bigger facility than the one we have right now. And I hope that a small theater will be an option. The one that is in Argyle right now, the South Pam Mood is about 180, and it fills up. They have to run extra performances of local talent. And they also bring in outside talent. That's what I want to see, that we get a multitude of arts, that it isn't just designed for one aspect that takes place only a few times. The other thing is, we have a huge summer visitor group, not just the tourists coming in and going. We have a large number of people who are here all summer. A number of them come back occasionally in the winter. They pour money into the arts. They're here for it and they support it. And this will be an asset for the community.
I'd like to go back to one comment about the parking. Excuse me. The house that's currently in the Collins Street parking lot, is there an expropriation in progress for that house?
No, there is not.
So, in Mr. MacKay Lyons' I believe, first conceptual drawing, I noticed that that little block was green, the rest was red around it. But throughout the rest of the presentation, that little greenhouse turned red. So I'm assuming that there's something in the works to get that house. Am I correct?
It would be our intention to negotiate with the owner and purchase the property.
And that hasn't started yet?
There have been discussions in the past, but nothing recently.
Okay. I wanted to clarify that. My last statement, or well, almost my last, I think. Mr. MacKay Lyons, again, you mentioned with all the beautiful pictures of all of those beautiful arts facilities around the world. The same thing, I believe this gentleman in the back mentioned, is the fact that all of those are well represented with people on an ongoing basis, and I can understand why. I've been to some of those cities that you mentioned, and I can understand it. And as mentioned before, in those cities, those art centers, in the downtown, in cities that have mass transit, mass population, few people in the downtown actually have cars because of their transportation system, which we don't have here. That parking issue is going to be the one big thing that is going to really make you decide whether or not this was a good decision or not in the future, which is guaranteed. Is that? That's getting away from that. Now, my final thing, you mentioned about the stakeholders and all of this. You've had consultations, the town of Yarmouth, you've had consultations with the municipalities, you've had consultation with dance groups, with theater groups and arts groups about one sort or another. The big group missing from all of that was the taxpayers of this town. Nothing was mentioned about the taxpayers of this town. The taxpayers of this town are going to be on the hook for your decisions, And what I'm concerned with is that those decisions are going to mean that my taxes are going to go up, and the benefits that are going to accrue to me will not be there. That's it.
Okay, so at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I have a question regarding the parking. So I use that parking lot every day, and it's very congested back there at the best of times. You come back from lunch and there's no place to park, and I want to speak my piece rather than be a keyboard warrior and do it behind somebody's back and be an idiot. So my concern is not necessarily once the project would be complete, although I would tend to agree with, I think it was Stephen that said an underground parking lot like that is a lot different to maneuver. People can't park in there now. They don't know how to park in there now. So I'm just saying. I'm there every day. I've been hit, so I'm just saying. So, but one thing that hasn't been addressed is folks with mobility issues and what's going to happen during that construction phase. That's a big concern. Also, once it's complete, if everything goes through, again, what about folks with mobility issues? There's drugstores there, there's financial institutions, there's all kinds of business. I see folks getting along with canes. I'm limping down the road. So I just don't feel like there's been a lot of consideration given for that mobility piece. Maybe parking places have been purchased or parking lots have been purchased elsewhere. But if people were okay to walk that distance, then it wouldn't be a big deal at all anyway. So anyway, so that's one concern. The other is, I wonder if you would be able to, anyone would be able to elaborate a little bit on why this particular location was chosen, especially when, and I don't really necessarily have a view as to whether it should be downtown or whether it should be where it is currently. I'm not really a stakeholder in that, and I think people that are better informed about it can make those decisions. However, if it was going to be downtown, why wouldn't we identify a location like the Tourist Bureau location, which I wasn't even aware that that was a choice, where you have a stunning view and the ability to present a beautiful property for tourists and locals alike. So I'm just wondering what the thought process was, if there was any sort of ability to elaborate a little bit on that as to why one place was chosen above the other. That's it. Thank you.
So the parking. And thank you, Sonia.
the parking piece, you're right, we have to understand, and I think I mentioned to you before, we can't just dismiss, for example, people with mobility issues. So how do we work with that? So it's on the list now, and we have to figure a way around that. And when I say this, I'm not saying this is a done deal, but maybe those parking spots in the side, in a couple of the side streets, maybe they are all painted in blue. Maybe they are. Maybe there's more of them that are painted in that way. Those types of things. So I'm sure there's options. We just have to make sure that we come up with them in the meantime. So do you want to speak to the
Well,
one over the other of the? Go ahead.
In a way, we've kind of explained the logic of this site being more central, the other one being really big, and there's nothing wrong with big, it could be a land bank. But I'm still stuck on Mr. Cook, I think it's Mr. Cook, who talked about the catchment areas, large population catchment areas that facilities like this normally have wrapped around them. And that's been really troubling me because I think it's a really great point. I mean, it threatens, it's great because it threatens everything we're trying to do, which is usually a good question. So I've been struggling to think, and I need to go away and sleep on it, but examples of small place success stories in the world. There are places in the world, in Scandinavia, there are places, there are things you can do in Assisi you can't do in Rome. There are places in the world that are little places that punch well above their weight and they have a world reputation. I was told, for instance, we did some work for the founder of Cirque du Soleil. He said, everybody said he couldn't do Cirque du Soleil in Bay St. Paul, Quebec. He said he couldn't do it. Well, he proved them wrong. We're doing a town now at 9,000 foot elevation in Utah. It doesn't want to happen. What a crazy idea. It's going to happen. I was told as a kid that there's no way you can have an internationally respected architecture firm in Nova Scotia. Forget it. Leave like everybody else does. Just leave. There's no point. Well, they're wrong. They were wrong. So there are examples, I think, of the little engine that could. There are examples of small communities that do world-class things and have a place in the world because they do something at a small scale very well, and they have a big catchment basin of another kind. So, what's that? I'm building a new office in Lunenburg right now.
What?
Yes, I am. Now, you probably don't want to hear that either. No, it's because I don't want to live in Halifax. I want to live in Lunenburg. But it doesn't make any sense on the surface, but you wait. It'll make sense. I'm in the field of dreams view of the world. We're in the optimism business. And when I was asked by the founder of Cirque du Soleil, he told me that the marketing people said he couldn't do what he wanted to do. And I said, oh yeah, those are the guys, that told you couldn't do Cirque du Soleil either. Well, as soon as I said that, he hired us. But it's tough, it's a high stakes game. If you're going to try to do something world class in a small center, it's going to be very hard, and it's not always going to work. So I found Mr. Cook, I think it was Mr. Cook who raised this one. Just very challenging. I'm one of those people who thinks you can will these things. You can dream and you can make it come true. I'm not able to listen to negativity. It doesn't work for me. I mean, there's so many reasons why nothing should ever happen. Why get out of bed in the morning?
Oh, yes, the location. Which Brian answered, yeah. Okay, we're good then. Okay, so go ahead, sorry.
My name is Joanna Gilman Hyde, and I use my middle name because of all the stuff on the internet. I'm an artist, a visual artist and a poet, and I drove here from Cape Sable Island where I live, and I want to continue living there. And I have a half a dozen large-scale paintings in my basement, which I would like to have exhibited somewhere locally. I've tried the art gallery here, the Western Branch, and I was told there's a two-year waiting period, and you have to apply, and I hesitate to apply. I'd rather be attended by a local board of some sort. I've just finished a 600 square foot canvas called Stratospheric Universe on my front yard, because that's the only place I had room to paint it, and it's still on exhibit there, and I invite anyone who wants to see it to my address, 39 Atwoods Road, The Hawk, Cape Sable Island. I would like to have a forum of some sort to show my artwork. I painted a 10,000 square foot canvas on the roof of the World Trade Center in 1984. That's on YouTube. I'd rather not be seen only on YouTube. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for making the trip from the Hawk. We got it.
I didn't ask a question, did I?
No, that's okay. No, that's okay.
Hi. I wanted to say before people here tonight that I really appreciate the efforts that the town has made in its mandate over the last 9 months. It's a very challenging task. There's an elephant in the room here that we've kind of danced around, but the reality is that the community is split on this issue and has been for over a decade. It takes leadership to do tough things, and I think that you mentioned tonight that you have many priorities, and you have chosen as a council to make the development of an arts regional center a priority. You've recognized that the residents of this community deserve it, that the artists of all breadths deserve it, that the children who will benefit from being exposed deserve it. I think it's really important that we all be adults now, and you have a responsibility to your residents and taxpayers to make decisions that are in the interests of the entire community, and you've done that. And preceding councils have also looked at this issue and made the same decision. And I'm not here to say whether you've made the right decision or not. I'm here to say that the likelihood is that in 4 years, the next council is going to make the same decision. And in 4 years after that, the next council probably is going to make the same decision. And as a journalist, you know, I just deal with facts. And I think that, you know, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And I'm speaking to the people who are invested in the Yark location on Parade Street, not because I don't understand and recognize the emotion that you have invested in being right about that location, but your council has said that they cannot support the location. And now, after 10 years, we're back here again. And this, to me, is an opportunity. And if we do not come together as a community, put our differences aside, and find a way to support this initiative, we will be waiting another 20 years. And the right fighters on all sides will still be with their positions, but we won't have a regional arts center. So I thank you very much for being adults and making decisions as tough as they are. And I wish you, I will support in whatever way I can, the realization of this dream. And I recognize that this is just the beginning. This is the vision. And now what we need to do is we need to compromise, we need to negotiate, we need to communicate, we need to talk. And if we do all of those things, we'll end up with something. It might not be what we see here tonight. It may be on a different scale altogether. It will be what we can realize together as a community. But please, please, let's not talk about where we were. We really have to talk about where we are and how we get to where we want to be. For me, the goal is a regional arts center. It is not a location.
Okay, are we good? So there will be more opportunities for this. Does somebody have a hand? Oh, okay, go ahead, sorry. So, I didn't realize this piece, but I guess it's good. So thank you for doing that. For any of you that want to stay around, maybe mingle a little bit and take a peek at these, understanding what we have said, that nothing's written in stone. There's a lot of work to do on every front imaginable, but we just want to be able to get to the next step. So take a peek at those. Thank you so much for coming, and please go to the Get Involved Yarmouth site and ask the questions, whatever you see fit. So thanks, folks.